Before Betty Crocker became a brand, she was America's dinner savior during the strangest times.
The pudding goes into the oven, where it will warm slightly while they are eating the main course.
Ham wrapped around bananas, sardines baked in pie crusts, and Frankfurters arranged like crowns.
It's hard to beat the sizzling aroma of lamb chops.
Her forgotten dinners turned poverty into presentation, rationing into celebration, and desperation into family memories that still make grandchildren laugh.
How'd you get on this morning, Frank?
About 3/4 of the second field done. We'll finish it off and I've had my dinner.
These 30 ancient meals fed families through depression and war. Let's rediscover the dinner magic our grandmothers served by heart. Ham banana rolls with cheese sauce. Ever wonder how your grandmother turned lunch meat into something that looked like Sunday dinner? Picture this scene. It's 1955, and Betty's rolling what appears to be an elegant entree. But surprise, it's ham wrapped around whole bananas smothered in bubbling cheese sauce that made kids giggle and adults shake their heads. You'd start with thick slices of deli ham, laying them flat on the counter like little blankets, ready for their unusual cargo. Whole peeled bananas went inside, rolled tight as cigars, then secured with toothpicks that made them look almost sophisticated. The magic happened when you nestled these odd bundles into a buttered casserole dish, then covered everything with a rich cheese sauce made from butter, flour, milk, and sharp cheddar melted to golden perfection. 30 minutes in a moderate oven transformed this bizarre combination into something that actually worked. Frankfurter Crown Casserole. How do you make hot dogs look like they belong at a royal banquet? Betty's Frankfurter Crown Casserole performed this kitchen magic, transforming humble wieners into a centerpiece worthy of Sunday company through clever arrangement and creative presentation. Picture the kitchen scene. Sliced frankfurters arranged in perfect circles around the edge of a casserole dish, their golden surfaces catching the light like jewels in a crown. The center filled with baked beans, rich and molasses dark, while fluffy mashed potatoes were piped around the edges like royal frosting on a savory cake. Sardine pie. What do you do when fresh meat costs more than most families can afford? Betty's sardine pie turned canned fish into a legitimate dinner that looked and tasted like something from a proper kitchen, proving that luxury could emerge from the most unexpected sources. Picture Depression-era tables where this golden-crusted beauty held court among fancier offerings, its humble origins forgotten the moment forks broke through flaky pastry into the savory filling beneath. You'd start with good-quality canned sardines, drained and carefully cleaned of any stray bones, while preserving those tender fish pieces that would become the pie's protein foundation. The filling combined those sardines with diced onions, hard-boiled eggs, and enough milk or cream to bind everything into a cohesive mixture that wouldn't fall apart when sliced. Seasonings were simple but effective: salt, pepper, and a touch of lemon juice that enhanced the fish's natural flavor without overwhelming its delicate taste. Nestled between two layers of Betty's reliable pie crust, this mixture baked into something remarkably satisfying. The pastry turned golden and flaky, while the filling set to a consistency that sliced cleanly, yet remained moist and flavorful. Pineapple mayonnaise salad. Ever see sweet fruit topped with mayonnaise and wonder what people were thinking? Betty's pineapple mayonnaise salad was once considered the height of modern sophistication, gracing church dinner tables and family Sunday spreads with its unusual combination that somehow worked in the context of mid-century entertaining. Picture Aunt Dorothy's dining room on a Sunday afternoon, where this pale yellow creation sat proudly in her best crystal bowl, garnished with paprika and parsley sprigs that made it look like something from a fancy hotel luncheon. The preparation was deceptively simple, yet the presentation made it feel special enough for company. You'd start with rings of canned pineapple, drained completely and arranged on lettuce leaves like golden halos on green cushions. The mayonnaise went on next, not just a dollop, but a generous coating that covered each ring completely, creating smooth white surfaces that caught the dining room light. The genius lay in the final touches, a sprinkle of paprika for color, chopped nuts for texture, and sometimes a cherry in the center of each ring that made the whole arrangement look like edible jewelry displayed on emerald silk. Sweet fruit topped with mayo was once elegant, representing the experimental spirit of kitchens where convenience foods met creative presentation. Modern as tomorrow, hostesses would proudly announce, serving this bizarre mid-century salad that reflected an era when combining unlikely ingredients was considered sophisticated rather than strange. Mock duck. How do you serve duck dinner when duck costs more than your weekly grocery budget? Betty's mock duck delivered all the satisfaction of fancy poultry using nothing but cabbage leaves and ground beef, creating a dish that looked impressive enough for special occasions while stretching expensive protein into family-sized portions. Picture the scene. Large cabbage leaves blanched until tender, laid flat like green napkins ready to embrace their savory filling. Ground beef mixed with breadcrumbs, onions, and seasonings created a mixture that would hold together during baking while developing rich flavors that made this humble dish taste special. You'd prepare the filling by browning the beef with diced onions until fragrant, then cooling it slightly before adding beaten eggs and breadcrumbs that would bind everything into a cohesive mass. Each cabbage leaf got a generous spoonful of this mixture, then was rolled tight and secured with toothpicks before being arranged in a buttered baking dish. The magic happened during the slow baking process, where the cabbage leaves softened and sweetened while the beef filling cooked through and developed deep, satisfying flavors. A simple gravy made from the pan drippings completed the illusion, making this thrifty creation taste remarkably like the expensive poultry dish it was designed to replace. Families chuckled at the name, but ate every bite of this clever substitution that proved resourcefulness could create meals worthy of celebration, even when budgets demanded creativity rather than luxury ingredients. Cheese crown pie. What happens when you disguise a casserole as dessert? Betty's cheese crown pie looked like birthday cake, but delivered savory satisfaction that made this 1940s creation the centerpiece of countless family dinners where presentation mattered as much as taste. Picture the dinner table scene. What appeared to be a golden layer cake sitting proudly on the good china platter, complete with fluffy white frosting that fooled every eye until the first bite revealed its savory secrets. You'd start with ground beef browned until crumbly, then combined with cooked noodles and enough seasoning to create a mixture that held together when baked. The genius lay in the presentation method that transformed ordinary ingredients into something special. The beef and noodle mixture was pressed into a round cake pan, creating smooth sides and a level top that would support the frosting without collapsing under its weight. The crown came from whipped cream cheese, beaten until light and fluffy, then spread across the surface like vanilla buttercream on a birthday cake. Paprika sprinkled on top added color that made the whole creation look festive enough for celebrations, even when it was just Tuesday night dinner stretched to feed unexpected company. Looked like dessert, tasted like thrift. This pie represented the era's fascination with dishes that surprised and delighted through unexpected combinations and clever presentation that made ordinary meals feel extraordinary. Velvet chicken soup. How do you create restaurant-quality soup from Sunday's leftover chicken carcass? Betty's velvet chicken soup transformed scraps into luxury through technique that made thin broth rich and satisfying enough to start elegant dinners or serve as complete meals when times were lean. Picture the kitchen scene. a pot of golden liquid simmering on the back burner, its surface smooth as silk and rich enough to coat the spoon like liquid gold. The secret lay not in expensive ingredients, but in the method that coaxed maximum flavor and richness from humble beginnings. You'd start with a good chicken broth, homemade from bones and vegetable scraps that had simmered for hours until every bit of flavor was extracted. The magic happened when you tempered beaten egg yolks with warm milk, then slowly whisked this mixture into the hot broth, creating a liaison that thickened the soup without making it heavy. The key was maintaining gentle heat that cooked the eggs gradually, creating silky richness without scrambling that would ruin the smooth texture. A touch of cream added at the end provided the final luxury note that made this simple soup taste like something from an expensive restaurant, luxurious in name but built from scraps. This soup proved that technique could transform leftovers into elegant first courses that impressed dinner guests who never suspected the humble origins of such sophisticated flavors. Tuna noodle ring with peas. Ever see a casserole disguised as cake? Betty's tuna noodle ring performed this kitchen magic, transforming ordinary ingredients into presentation that looked special enough for company while delivering the comfort food satisfaction families craved. Picture the dinner table. What appeared to be a golden bundt cake sitting on the good china platter, but surprise, it was tuna and peas suspended in noodles that had been molded into elegant ring form that impressed guests while stretching expensive protein into generous family portions. You'd start by cooking egg noodles until tender, then combining them with flaked tuna, bright green peas, and enough cream sauce to bind everything together without making it soupy. The mixture went into a well-greased ring mold, where it would hold its shape during baking and unmold cleanly for dramatic presentation. The secret lay in the gelatin addition that helped everything set firmly enough to support its own weight when turned out onto serving platters. As it baked, the surface developed a golden crust, while the interior stayed moist and flavorful, creating textural contrast that kept every bite interesting. A casserole disguised as cake, this ring proved that presentation could transform humble ingredients into centerpieces worthy of special occasions, even when the contents were nothing more than pantry staples and a can of tuna. Prune-stuffed pork chops. What happens when you hide sweetness inside Sunday meat? Betty's prune-stuffed pork chops delivered unexpected pleasure in every bite, creating thick, impressive chops that looked restaurant-worthy while incorporating dried fruit that added moisture, flavor, and natural sweetness to otherwise plain pork. Picture the scene. Thick pork chops sitting on the good china, each one plump with stuffing that peeked out temptingly from carefully cut pockets. The preparation required skill, but the results impressed everyone who tasted this clever combination of savory meat and sweet fruit. You'd start with thick pork chops, at least an inch deep, then use a sharp knife to cut horizontal pockets that would hold the stuffing without falling apart during cooking. The filling combined chopped prunes with breadcrumbs, diced celery, and enough chicken broth to create a mixture that stayed moist throughout the baking process. Each chop got stuffed full, then secured with toothpicks before being seasoned and browned in a hot skillet that sealed in flavors and created appetizing color. The final baking happened in a moderate oven where the meat cooked through while the prune stuffing stayed sweet and moist. A sweet surprise tucked inside Sunday meat, these chops represented the era's appreciation for dishes that combined unexpected flavors in harmonious ways that pleased both adults who enjoyed sophisticated tastes and children who loved the hidden sweetness. Bologna Bake. How do you elevate humble lunch meat into Sunday dinner? Betty's Bologna Bake transformed thick deli slices into a legitimate casserole that fed hungry families while making modest ingredients feel substantial enough for weekend meals when something more than sandwiches was required. Picture the kitchen scene. Thick bologna rounds, layered like oversized pepperoni in a deep casserole dish. alternating with sliced potatoes and generous amounts of cheese that would melt into golden perfection during the slow baking process that transformed everything into comfort food magic. You'd start with bologna sliced thick as steaks, removing the casing and scoring the edges to prevent curling during cooking. Potatoes were sliced thin and layered between the meat rounds, creating substantial layers that would absorb flavors while adding bulk that made this dish filling enough for hungry families. Veal Birds. What do you call meat that's rolled like cigars and browned like precious gems? Betty's Veal Birds transformed thin cutlets into elegant presentations that looked far more expensive than their actual cost, creating individual portions that made family dinners feel like restaurant experiences. Picture the dinner table. Individual servings that looked like they came from a fancy hotel dining room, each one golden brown and tied with kitchen string like little presents waiting to be unwrapped. The preparation took patience, but the impressive results made every step worthwhile. You'd start with thin veal cutlets, pounded even thinner to ensure tenderness, then spread with seasoned stuffing made from breadcrumbs, herbs, and enough stock to hold everything together. Each cutlet was rolled tightly around its filling, then secured with string or toothpicks before being dredged in flour for browning. Victory Garden Vegetable Pie. How do you make a complete dinner from whatever's growing in the backyard? Betty's Victory Garden Vegetable Pie transformed seasonal produce into substantial meals that carried families through wartime rationing when meat was precious and creativity was essential for survival. Picture the wartime kitchen scene. A golden-crusted pie, fresh from the oven, filled with whatever vegetables the family garden had produced that week. Carrots, potatoes, green beans, and peas, all nestled under flaky pastry that made this meatless meal feel complete and satisfying. You'd start by preparing whatever vegetables were available, cutting them into uniform pieces that would cook evenly and look attractive when the pie was sliced. A simple white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk bound everything together while providing richness that made this vegetarian dish feel substantial. Deviled tongue. What happens when you take the most intimidating cut of meat and transform it into Sunday elegance? Betty's deviled tongue proved that even the strangest proteins could become dinner party centerpieces when prepared with skill and presented with confidence that impressed the bravest dinner guests. Picture the scene. A golden brown roast sitting proudly on the Sunday platter, its surface glazed with spicy mustard sauce that made mouths water from across the dining room. The preparation required patience, but the results impressed everyone brave enough to try this challenging ingredient. You'd start with a fresh beef tongue, simmered slowly in seasoned water until fork tender, then peeled while warm to remove the tough outer skin that would interfere with the final presentation. Kidney bean loaf. How do you create satisfying meatloaf when meat is rationed? Betty's kidney bean loaf delivered protein and comfort without precious beef, creating substantial slices that satisfied hungry families while stretching wartime budgets that demanded creativity rather than luxury ingredients. Picture the dinner table. Thick slices of what looked like traditional meatloaf, but made from beans that had been transformed into something remarkably similar to the familiar favorite. The texture and flavor surprised everyone who tasted this clever wartime substitution. You'd start with cooked kidney beans, mashed until smooth but not pureed, maintaining some texture that would create interest in the finished loaf. Breadcrumbs, beaten eggs, and seasonings bound everything together while chopped vegetables added complexity that made this vegetarian dish taste satisfying rather than boring. Mock chicken legs. What do you do when chicken costs too much, but your family craves that familiar drumstick experience? Betty's mock chicken legs transformed ground pork and veal into convincing drumsticks that satisfied both budget and nostalgia while creating Sunday dinner magic from affordable ingredients. Picture the kitchen scene. What appeared to be golden fried chicken legs lined up on the platter, but made from ground meat that had been molded around wooden skewers to create the familiar shape that made children reach for them with both hands, just like real drumsticks. You'd start with a mixture of ground pork and veal, seasoned well and bound with eggs and breadcrumbs until it held together firmly enough to mold around wooden sticks without falling apart during cooking. Macaroni Mold. What happens when you transform familiar pasta into elegant presentation? Macaroni mold turned ordinary noodles into sophisticated centerpieces that impressed dinner guests while delivering comfort food satisfaction in forms that looked far more impressive. Picture the dinner table, a shimmering golden ring sitting proudly on the good china platter, its surface smooth as glass and studded with colorful vegetables that caught the dining room light like edible jewelry in an amber setting that made everyone wonder how such beauty emerged from humble beginnings. You'd start with cooked macaroni, drained but still warm, then combined with beaten eggs and enough stock to create mixture that would set firmly when chilled. Diced vegetables, carrots, peas, celery, added color and texture that made each slice visually interesting while providing nutritional value. The magic happened during the chilling process, where everything set into firm consistency that could be unmolded cleanly and sliced into neat portions that revealed the internal pattern of pasta and vegetables suspended in golden aspic that looked professional despite amateur preparation. Kids never forgot its wobble, but adults appreciated how this unusual presentation elevated simple ingredients into something worthy of special occasions when families wanted to impress guests without spending money they didn't have on expensive ingredients or complicated techniques. Pineapple cheese casserole. How do you unite sweet and savory in ways that actually work? Betty's pineapple cheese casserole created harmony between unlikely partners, producing dishes that became potluck favorites, despite their unusual flavor combinations that surprised everyone who tasted them at church suppers and family gatherings. Picture the potluck table, a bubbling golden casserole sitting among more traditional offerings, its surface crispy with melted cheese and crackers, while sweet pineapple chunks peeked through like tropical surprises in an otherwise familiar comfort food landscape that intrigued curious diners. You'd start with canned pineapple chunks, drained thoroughly to prevent soggy results, then layer them with shredded sharp cheddar cheese that would provide tangy contrast to the fruit's sweetness. Crushed crackers on top added crunch that completed the textural variety. The baking process melted everything together while creating golden crust that looked appetizing and held all the flavors in harmony. The finished casserole delivered unexpected pleasure with each forkful, revealing different combinations of sweet, salty, and crispy that somehow worked together. Sweet and savory united at potlucks in ways that challenged conventional flavor pairing while creating dishes that became beloved traditions at community gatherings where adventurous cooks shared their most successful experiments with neighbors who appreciated creativity and boldness. But Betty's strangest creations were yet to come. Liver loaf. What do you do with the most nutritious yet least popular organ meat? Betty's liver loaf disguised this healthy ingredient in familiar meatloaf form, creating substantial dinners that delivered iron-rich nutrition while making liver palatable to families who needed its benefits but resisted its strong flavor. Picture the Depression-era dinner table, thick slices of what appeared to be ordinary meatloaf, hiding the secret ingredient that made mothers feel virtuous about their family's nutrition, while children remained blissfully unaware of consuming the dreaded liver they normally refused to touch. You'd start with fresh liver, ground fine to eliminate the texture issues that made many people reject this nutritious organ meat. Combined with ground beef or pork, the liver became less noticeable while still providing its nutritional benefits to families who needed every vitamin they could afford. Breadcrumbs, eggs, and seasonings bound everything together, while chopped onions and herbs masked any remaining liver flavor that might give away the secret. The loaf baked like traditional meatloaf, developing golden crust that looked familiar and appetizing rather than intimidating. Parents called it healthy. Kids dreaded it once they discovered the secret. But this Depression-era innovation provided essential nutrition to families who couldn't afford expensive cuts of meat, yet needed the vitamins that organ meats provided for growing children and hard-working adults. Jell-O vegetable ring. Why did elegant hostesses consider molded salads the pinnacle of sophisticated entertaining? Betty's Jell-O vegetable ring transformed humble garden produce into shimmering centerpieces that impressed bridge club guests while showcasing vegetables in forms that made them feel special rather than ordinary. Picture the perfectly appointed dining room. A crystal-clear ring mold sitting on the silver platter, its transparent surface revealing suspended vegetables arranged in artistic patterns that caught the light like edible stained-glass windows that made everyone wonder how such beauty was achieved. You'd start with unflavored gelatin bloomed in cold vegetable broth, then dissolved in hot liquid that would provide both setting power and savory flavor that complemented the vegetables without overwhelming their natural tastes. The timing was crucial for perfect suspension. Blanched vegetables, carrots, celery, peas, went in when the gelatin was partially set, creating even distribution without everything sinking to the bottom. The ring mold itself added elegance, creating hollow centers perfect for filling with mayonnaise rosettes or fresh greens. The shimmering salad centerpiece of Sunday spreads, these rings vanished as tastes modernized and gelatin lost its status as sophisticated entertaining essential. But they once represented the height of hostess artistry and creative presentation that made ordinary vegetables feel extraordinary and special. Peanut butter loaf. What happens when you use peanut butter as the protein in a main course? Betty's peanut butter loaf transformed this childhood favorite into substantial dinner fare that provided protein and satisfaction when meat was too expensive for Depression-era families who needed filling meals from affordable ingredients. Picture the dinner scene. Thick slices of dense golden loaf that looked substantial enough for Sunday dinner, delivering nutty richness and satisfying texture that filled hungry bellies while stretching grocery budgets that couldn't accommodate expensive cuts of meat during hard times. You'd start with creamy peanut butter as the protein base, then add breadcrumbs, beaten eggs, and enough milk to create mixture that would hold together when sliced. Chopped celery and onions provided textural interest, while seasonings made this unusual loaf taste like legitimate dinner fare rather than novelty food. The baking process was similar to traditional meatloaf, creating golden exterior that looked appetizing while the interior stayed moist and flavorful. Simple gravy made from the pan drippings completed the dinner presentation, making this protein substitute feel like familiar comfort food. Peanut butter as protein for dinner represented Depression-era innovation at its most creative, proving that familiar flavors could be reimagined as main courses when circumstances demanded resourcefulness, and families needed satisfying meals from whatever ingredients remained affordable and available. Remember that mock duck from earlier? This loaf shared its spirit of creative substitution. Oxtail Stew. How do you create rich, satisfying stew from the cheapest cuts of meat? Betty's Oxtail Stew transformed tough, inexpensive bones into liquid gold through slow cooking that extracted every bit of flavor and nutrition while creating meals that tasted far more luxurious than their humble cost suggested. Picture the farmhouse kitchen. a heavy pot simmering on the back burner for hours, filling the house with rich aromas that promised substantial satisfaction despite the modest investment in ingredients that most people overlooked at the butcher shop because they didn't understand their potential. You'd start with oxtail pieces, browned until deeply colored to develop complex flavors that would deepen during the long cooking process. Vegetables, onions, carrots, celery, added sweetness and body, while herbs and seasonings created complexity that made this simple stew taste sophisticated. The magic happened during hours of gentle simmering that broke down tough connective tissue into gelatin that enriched the broth while the meat became fork tender and fell off the bones. The finished stew was rich, satisfying, and deeply flavorful despite its economical origins. Families remember the rich aroma filling the house during those long cooking hours when patience transformed the toughest, cheapest cuts into meals that provided more satisfaction than expensive steaks could deliver, proving that time and technique mattered more than costly ingredients. Hot dog bean bake. What happens when you elevate humble Frankfurters into Sunday dinner? Betty's hot dog bean bake transformed children's lunch favorites into substantial family meals through creative presentation and hearty additions that made simple ingredients feel special enough for weekend dining. Picture the Sunday dinner table, a bubbling casserole that looked impressive enough for company, with Frankfurters peeking through golden biscuit topping while rich bean mixture provided substance that satisfied hungry families who needed comfort food that felt celebratory rather than ordinary. You'd start with baked beans as the foundation, enriched with molasses, mustard, and onions that created complex flavors worthy of Sunday dinner. Sliced hot dogs distributed throughout provided protein, while their familiar taste appealed to children who might resist more exotic ingredients. The crowning glory was biscuit dough rolled thin and cut into decorative shapes that covered the casserole like pastry on a fancy pot pie. As it baked, the biscuits turned golden brown, while the beans bubbled underneath, creating textural contrast that made every bite interesting. The kids' favorite Sunday dinner, this bake proved that familiar flavors could be elevated through creative presentation and thoughtful preparation that transformed simple ingredients into meals worthy of family celebration and weekend gathering around tables filled with comfort food satisfaction. Date Nut Loaf. Why did every church lady's recipe box contain multiple versions of this dense, sweet bread? Betty's Date Nut Loaf represented the perfect intersection of thrift and hospitality, creating gifts that improved with age while showcasing ingredients that were affordable yet impressive enough for special occasions. Picture the kitchen counter lined with wrapped loaves, each one destined for neighbors recovering from illness or distant relatives who deserved homemade treats that traveled well and delivered comfort across many miles. The preparation was simple, but the results impressed everyone who received these thoughtful gifts. You'd start with chopped dates and walnuts as the foundation, creating mixture that would provide sweetness, texture, and richness without requiring expensive butter or multiple eggs. The batter came together quickly in one bowl, making this an accessible recipe for busy homemakers. Hot coffee provided the liquid base, its slight bitterness balancing the date's intense sweetness while adding complexity that made this bread taste sophisticated rather than simply sweet. The finished loaves sliced beautifully, revealing dark crumbs studded with jewel-like fruit and golden nuts. Salmon Wiggle. What do you call creamed fish that moves on the plate? Betty's Salmon Wiggle earned its playful name from the way it jiggled when spooned over toast, creating comfort food that satisfied families while stretching expensive canned salmon into generous portions that fed everyone around Depression-era tables. Picture the breakfast scene: golden toast points arranged on plates, topped with pink-studded cream sauce that moved slightly when the plate was nudged, creating visual interest that made this simple dish feel more entertaining than ordinary creamed fish preparations. You'd start with canned salmon, carefully cleaned of bones and skin, then flaked into bite-sized pieces that would distribute evenly throughout the cream sauce. The base was classic white sauce, butter, flour, and milk, cooked until smooth and thick enough to coat pasta or toast. The wiggle came from the sauce consistency, thin enough to move slightly when served, yet thick enough to cling to toast points, that soaked up every drop of the creamy, salmon-rich mixture. Hard-boiled eggs often joined the salmon, adding protein and visual appeal that made this simple dish feel more substantial. Tomato Aspic Supreme. What happens when you turn vegetable juice into elegant dining? Betty's Tomato Aspic Supreme transformed humble tomato juice into sophisticated side dishes that impressed dinner guests while showcasing vegetables in forms that seemed far more complex than their simple ingredient lists suggested. Picture the dinner scene. Individual molds sitting on lettuce-lined plates, each one a perfect ruby-red dome that caught the dining room light while revealing suspended pieces of celery, olives, and herbs arranged in patterns that looked like edible art rather than simple salad preparations. You'd start with high-quality tomato juice, seasoned with herbs, lemon juice, and just enough salt to enhance the natural flavors without overwhelming the delicate balance. Unflavored gelatin bloomed in cold juice, then dissolved in hot liquid that would set everything into firm consistency. The timing was crucial for perfect suspension. Vegetables went in when the gelatin was partially set, creating even distribution without everything settling to the bottom. The individual molds added elegance, allowing each guest to receive their own perfectly formed serving that looked restaurant-worthy. Applesauce Meatloaf. How do you keep meatloaf moist when butter and eggs are rationed? Betty's Applesauce Meatloaf discovered that fruit could replace fat while adding subtle sweetness that enhanced rather than overwhelmed the savory flavors that made this wartime adaptation successful enough to outlast the shortages that inspired it. Picture the wartime kitchen, a golden brown loaf fresh from the oven, its surface glazed and appetizing while the interior stayed remarkably moist, despite the absence of traditional ingredients that weren't available during rationing periods when creativity became essential for family satisfaction. You'd start with ground beef as the protein base, then add unsweetened applesauce as the moisture source that would keep everything tender while providing subtle fruit flavor that complemented the meat rather than competing with it. Breadcrumbs and beaten eggs bound everything together. The applesauce worked magic during baking, preventing the dreaded dry meatloaf while adding natural sweetness that made each slice interesting and flavorful. The finished product looked traditional but delivered enhanced satisfaction that made families prefer this version even after rationing ended. Sweetness blended into Sunday tradition in ways that proved wartime innovations often produced better results than original recipes, creating dishes that survived their emergency origins to become beloved family favorites that continued appearing on tables long after necessity no longer demanded such creativity. Prune Whip Casserole. What happens when you transform dried fruit into elegant dessert? Betty's Prune Whip Casserole turned humble prunes into airy, custard-like creations that graced Sunday tables with sophisticated sweetness while providing nutrition and satisfaction from ingredients that cost practically nothing at Depression-era prices. Picture the Sunday dessert table, individual ramekins filled with pale purple clouds that looked far more elegant than their humble origins suggested, each one topped with a dollop of whipped cream that made this simple preparation feel special enough for company dining. You'd start with stewed prunes, cooked until tender, then pureed smooth to eliminate any texture issues that might make diners hesitant to try this unusual dessert. The puree folded into stiffly beaten egg whites, created airy lightness that transformed the dense fruit into something ethereal. A touch of sugar and lemon juice enhanced the natural fruit flavors while creating balance that made each spoonful pleasant. Dried fruit turned into Sunday sweetness. This casserole proved that even the most humble ingredients could be elevated into sophisticated desserts when prepared with skill and presented with confidence that made families appreciate creativity born from necessity rather than luxury. Baked Alaska, family style. How do you create restaurant magic in a home kitchen? Betty's family-style Baked Alaska brought fancy dining room drama to Sunday dinner tables through spectacular presentation that impressed guests, while using accessible techniques that made this showstopper achievable for home cooks with modest equipment and ingredients. Picture the dinner scene, a golden-brown meringue mountain sitting proudly on the good china platter, its peaks and swirls promising sweet surprises hidden beneath the cloud-like exterior that made everyone gather around to watch the dramatic slicing that revealed layers of cake and ice cream sealed inside. You'd start with a layer of cake, pound cake or sponge worked perfectly, then top with firmly frozen ice cream that would stay solid during the brief baking time required to brown the meringue without melting the frozen interior. The meringue itself was the star, beaten egg whites and sugar whipped until glossy peaks formed, then spread over everything like architectural frosting that sealed in the cold while creating dramatic presentation. A quick trip to a very hot oven browned the exterior while leaving everything else perfectly chilled. Felt like a holiday every time it appeared. This dessert represented special occasion magic that made ordinary Sunday dinners feel celebratory through spectacular presentation that required more confidence than expensive ingredients to achieve restaurant-worthy results at home. Sardine and tomato bake. What do you do with canned fish when fresh seafood costs too much? Betty's sardine and tomato bake transformed humble pantry ingredients into legitimate dinner that satisfied families while stretching protein budgets during times when every penny counted and creativity mattered more than luxury ingredients. Picture the Depression-era dinner table, a bubbling casserole that looked substantial enough for Sunday dinner, its golden breadcrumb topping hiding layers of fish and vegetables that provided nutrition and satisfaction from ingredients that cost practically nothing at neighborhood groceries. You'd start with good quality canned sardines, drained and carefully cleaned of any stray bones, while preserving the tender fish pieces that would become the protein foundation. Sliced tomatoes provided acidity and moisture that balanced the rich fish while adding color and nutrients. Layers alternated, sardines, tomatoes, seasoned breadcrumbs, until the casserole dish was full. Then everything was dotted with butter and baked until the top turned golden, and the flavors melded into harmonious combination that tasted far more sophisticated than its humble ingredient list suggested. The cheap fish dinner no one brags about today. This bake represented an era when canned sardines were respectable dinner fare rather than specialty items, proving that economic necessity could create satisfying meals when approached with skill and presented with confidence that made families grateful for creativity that kept them well fed. But the story of these forgotten dinners runs deeper than simple recipes. They represent a time when American families gathered around tables where every meal carried meaning, where mothers transformed limitation into celebration, and where children learned that creativity could triumph over circumstance. Each dish tells a story not just of ingredients and techniques, but of communities pulling together during the hardest times in our nation's history. Consider the social context that birthed these unusual combinations. The Great Depression didn't just change what families could afford, it fundamentally altered how they thought about food itself. Waste became unthinkable, Every scrap had potential. Every meal was an exercise in making do, but making do with pride and presentation that preserved dignity even when paychecks disappeared and pantry shelves grew bare. During World War II, rationing books became more valuable than cash. Sugar, butter, meat, and even coffee required stamps that limited how much families could purchase, regardless of their ability to pay. In this environment, Betty Crocker's unusual recipes weren't eccentricities. They were survival guides dressed up as homemaking advice, teaching American women how to feed their families well when traditional ingredients simply weren't available. The psychology behind these dishes reveals something profound about human adaptability. Rather than simply removing unavailable ingredients, creative cooks learned substitution as an art form. Applesauce replaced butter and eggs. Gelatin transformed humble vegetables into elegant presentations. Ground meat was stretched with oats, beans, and even peanut butter until 1 pound could feed 8 people without anyone feeling deprived. These weren't just recipes, they were acts of love disguised as economy. Every ham banana roll represented a mother's determination to make dinner special despite having almost nothing to work with. Every mock chicken leg proved that families deserved celebration even when circumstances suggested otherwise. The elaborate presentation of these simple dishes showed that dignity and creativity could coexist with necessity and thrift. The decline of these dishes parallels broader changes in American food culture. As prosperity returned after the war, families could afford traditional ingredients again. Convenience foods promised to liberate women from the time-consuming creativity that economic necessity had demanded. Supermarkets offered year-round availability of ingredients that had once been seasonal luxuries, making elaborate substitutions unnecessary. Yet something valuable was lost in this transition to abundance. The skills that created Salmon Wiggle and mock duck represented more than cooking techniques. They embodied problem-solving abilities, resourcefulness, and the confidence to experiment with unexpected combinations. These dishes required intuition, timing, and the willingness to risk failure in pursuit of family satisfaction. Modern food culture, with its emphasis on authentic ethnic cuisines and farm-to-table ingredients, often dismisses these depression and wartime creations as mere curiosities. But viewing them through the lens of sustainability reveals their relevance to contemporary concerns about food waste, environmental impact, and economic inequality that continue to challenge families today. In an age where food insecurity affects millions of Americans, these forgotten recipes offer lessons in creativity, dignity, and the power of presentation to transform scarcity into abundance. Betty Crocker understood something profound about American psychology. Families needed to feel special, even when circumstances suggested otherwise. Her recipes provided the tools for transformation that went beyond mere nutrition, to address emotional and social needs that persist regardless of economic conditions. Every elaborate molded salad was an act of defiance against despair. Every carefully arranged casserole a declaration that families deserved beauty and celebration. The techniques these dishes required, careful timing for gelatin, proper seasoning of unusual combinations, attractive presentation of humble ingredients, developed skills that many modern cooks have never learned. These forgotten recipes demanded patience, observation, and the ability to envision finished results that bore little resemblance to their component parts. Perhaps most importantly, these dishes fostered family connection in ways that modern convenience foods cannot replicate. Children who helped arrange vegetables in aspic rings or watched mothers carefully fold prune puree into egg whites learned lessons about patience, creativity, and the satisfaction that comes from transforming simple ingredients through skill and care. The communal preparation of these elaborate dishes created opportunities for teaching and bonding that transcended the simple act of feeding families. The molecular gastronomy that transforms familiar ingredients into surprising forms echoes the transformation magic that Depression-era cooks practiced out of necessity rather than novelty. The regional variations that developed around these recipes reflect the diversity of American communities adapting shared challenges to local tastes and available ingredients. Southern versions incorporated local vegetables and seasonings, while Midwest variations reflected farming communities' access to different proteins and produce. The tools required for these dishes, ring molds, gelatin powders, canned goods, represented the democratization of cooking techniques that had previously been available only to professional chefs or wealthy households with extensive kitchen staff. Betty Crocker's recipes made elegant presentation accessible to ordinary families with basic equipment and modest budgets. The social rituals surrounding these dishes, the careful unmolding of aspic rings, the dramatic slicing of baked Alaska, the communal sharing of substantial casseroles, created moments of theater that transformed everyday dining into memorable experiences that strengthened family bonds and community connections. Understanding these forgotten dinners requires recognizing that they succeeded not despite their unusual combinations, but because of the care and creativity invested in their preparation and presentation. They prove that limitation can inspire innovation, that necessity can foster artistry, and that the most memorable meals often emerge from the most challenging circumstances. The lessons embedded in these recipes extend beyond cooking into broader principles of resourcefulness, creativity, and the power of presentation to transform ordinary experiences into extraordinary memories. In an age of abundance, they remind us that satisfaction often depends more on gratitude and creativity than on expensive ingredients or elaborate equipment. The revival of interest in these forgotten dishes among contemporary food enthusiasts suggests that modern cooks are rediscovering the satisfaction that comes from transformation cooking, turning simple ingredients into impressive results through skill, patience, and imagination, rather than relying on expensive components or convenient shortcuts. As we face new challenges around sustainability, food security, and community connection, these Depression and wartime recipes offer tested solutions that prioritized both practicality and pleasure, proving that families can maintain dignity and celebration even when circumstances demand creativity and resourcefulness that previous generations took for granted. The scientific principles underlying these seemingly bizarre combinations reveal sophisticated understanding of food chemistry that modern molecular gastronomy has only recently rediscovered. The gelatin structures that suspended vegetables in clear aspic required precise temperature control and timing that rivaled professional kitchen techniques. The emulsification that made mayonnaise chocolate cake work demonstrated intuitive understanding of fat and protein interactions that food scientists now explain with complex formulas. Consider the fermentation knowledge embedded in these recipes. The slight tang that developed in dishes containing vinegar or citrus wasn't just flavor enhancement, it was food preservation that extended shelf life when refrigeration was unreliable. The salt curing that prepared meats for mock dishes utilized techniques that professional charcutiers study for years, applied by home cooks who learned through necessity and passed knowledge through generations. The nutritional wisdom hidden in these combinations often exceeded contemporary understanding of vitamins and minerals. Liver loaf, despite its unappealing name, provided iron and B vitamins that prevented anemia in families who couldn't afford varied diets. Vegetable aspics concentrated nutrients in forms that children would actually consume, solving dietary deficiency problems through creative presentation rather than expensive supplements. The seasonal rhythms that governed these recipes connected families to natural cycles that modern convenience has disrupted. Victory garden vegetable pies changed throughout the growing season. teaching children to anticipate and appreciate different ingredients as they became available. This seasonal eating pattern created nutritional variety that supported health while building appreciation for natural abundance and scarcity cycles. The preservation techniques embedded in these recipes represented centuries of accumulated knowledge about food safety and storage. The high sugar content in date nut loaves wasn't just sweetness. It was preservation that allowed these gifts to travel safely across long distances without refrigeration. The salt and acid balance in pickled preparations created environments hostile to harmful bacteria while enhancing flavors that made simple ingredients taste complex and satisfying. The cooking methods required for these dishes developed heat management skills that modern convenience cooking has largely eliminated. Achieving perfect gelatin consistency demanded understanding of temperature gradients and timing that couldn't be rushed or automated. The slow braising that transformed tough oxtail into tender stew required patience and observation that built intuitive cooking skills transferable to countless other preparations. The presentation techniques that made humble ingredients look elegant required artistic skills that contemporary Instagram food photography has revived in digital form. The arrangement of vegetables in clear aspic created visual compositions that demonstrated color theory and symmetrical design principles. The economic calculations required for successful execution of these recipes developed mathematical skills applied in practical contexts. Calculating quantities needed to stretch expensive proteins across multiple servings required fraction manipulation and proportional reasoning. Successfully executing dishes with multiple components requiring different cooking methods and precise temperature control built confidence in handling complex tasks under pressure while maintaining attention to detail and quality standards. The adaptation skills developed through working with limited and varying ingredients built resilience and creativity that extended far beyond cooking applications. Learning to envision successful results from unlikely ingredient combinations required imagination and risk tolerance that served these cooks well in other challenging situations requiring innovative solutions. The quality control standards maintained despite resource limitations demonstrated commitment to excellence that persisted regardless of circumstances. Families who maintained elegant presentation standards using basic equipment and limited ingredients developed work ethics and pride in craftsmanship that influenced their approach to all life activities. The community networking that developed around sharing successful recipes and techniques created social support systems that extended beyond food preparation. Women who collaborated on church supper preparations built relationships that provided emotional and practical support during difficult times, creating resilience through community connection that strengthened entire neighborhoods. The cultural preservation that occurred through maintaining traditional preparation methods ensured that valuable knowledge survived economic disruption and social change. Immigrant families who adapted their ancestral techniques to available American ingredients created fusion cuisines that preserved cultural identity while embracing new circumstances, building bridges between old and new worlds through shared meals. The health benefits that emerged from these preparation methods often exceeded those of more expensive alternatives. Slow cooking methods used for tough cuts of meat created bioavailable nutrients through extended extraction processes. Fermentation and curing techniques developed beneficial bacteria and enhanced mineral absorption that supported digestive health and immune function. The pedagogical value of these complex preparations created learning opportunities that engaged multiple senses and learning styles. Children who helped with elaborate molded salads learned through visual observation, tactile manipulation, and taste testing that reinforced lessons about patience, precision, and the satisfaction of completing challenging projects through sustained effort and attention to detail. The therapeutic benefits of engaging in complex, creative creative cooking provided mental health support during stressful historical periods. The meditative aspects of kneading, stirring, and careful timing offered respite from anxiety about uncertain economic and political circumstances while creating tangible accomplishments that provided satisfaction and family appreciation. The celebration of small victories inherent in successfully executing these challenging recipes provided emotional sustenance during difficult times. The pride and satisfaction that came from creating beautiful, delicious meals from limited resources offered psychological rewards that sustained morale and family unity when external circumstances might otherwise have created despair and division. The intergenerational knowledge transfer that occurred through teaching these complex techniques created family traditions that strengthened bonds across generations. Grandmothers who taught granddaughters the secrets of perfect aspic timing transmitted far more than cooking skills. They shared values about persistence, creativity, and the importance of maintaining standards and taking pride in one's work, regardless of circumstances. These 30 forgotten treasures from Betty's dinner table prove that our grandmothers were true culinary artists, turning rationing into creativity and scarcity into abundance through techniques that made every meal feel special. Their legacy lives not just in the recipes they left behind, but in the principles they embodied. That families deserve beauty and celebration regardless of circumstances. Creativity can triumph over limitation, and that the most meaningful meals often emerge from the deepest challenges. Which dinner takes you back the most? Share your family memories in the comments below, and pass these recipes along so these sweet traditions never fade away.